what's going on out there? This is Ed D'Souza coming at you from NECANN 2019. I got to say that I'm very honored that I got the first interview for the weekend for NECANN TV. Who else could kick off the show other than Mr. Barney Frank?
Thank you, Ed. Great to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I mean, it's an honor to sit with you. I know I got to meet you last Saturday at the Young Jerk show.
Right.
You're doing some amazing things for the cannabis industry in Massachusetts.
Well, I started at something you do like to finish what you started. I filed a bill in 1972 when I was a freshman.
OG right here.
I was a freshman at the state legislature to make marijuana legal. I worked on it in Congress, and I'm very happy to see that it's going to happen. There's going to be, at the
When
very
you say
least,
it's going to happen, you talking federally?
yeah, at the very least, Congress is going to pass a bill in this Congress, either this year or early next year, that will make it clear that banks can take marijuana business money. That's
Yes.
a very serious issue.
Yes.
That's going to be cleared up. I think the next time the Democrats control the Senate, unfortunately the Republicans have not as been supportive, but the next time the Democrats have the President of the House and the Senate, at the very least it'll be legalized state by state up to the state and maybe beyond that.
And this goes to show that, you know, when the other side says state rights should matter here, 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 well, give us our cannabis rights.
You're right. There's a hypocrisy there that they have. People who talk about states' rights generally mean the state's right to do what they want, what they, the people advocating, want. But I think that state-by-state issue is very powerful. And so having, I think, been part of the success we're going to get legislatively, I was glad to have the chance to work with Beantown, Greentown,
Yeah,
and
tell
take
me more
advantage
about
of it.
that.
Well, I knew the head of Andrew Muddy through my husband's. He's a family friend.
Great guy.
And I'm impressed with what they're doing. They're responsible, they're locally oriented, and having been in the public sector pushing for making marijuana available, now I'm happy to do it in the private sector to make sure it's done well.
You know, Mr. Frank, as a small-time cultivator myself, I have to say it is an honor that you're working with a small business. You know, you could go anywhere just like Boehner did, just like Well did, but you chose to go to a small mom-and-pop style business in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think people pay a lot of lip service to the small business but don't really help them. And I also differentiate myself. Bill Weld has been supportive of smoking marijuana. John Boehner, I have no sympathy for. He spent a lot of time killing any legislation that would have made marijuana legal, and his argument presumably was that it's bad for you. Well, I don't understand if he thought it was bad for people, why he's willing to make money off it. I think there's a hypocrisy there that's unfortunate.
Do you mind if I ask you a political question?
No.
So it was recently came out that the pharmaceutical industry has been paying politicians lots of money to stand against cannabis rights. Do you see, now that that exposure has come out, maybe they'll back off a little and give us some leeway in the rights that we need?
Well, I think so, although it's not up to them anymore. What you have is strong public sentiment in favor of marijuana. You see this when the states referenda go our way, and I can tell you that members of Congress now understand, particularly with younger people, there's a lot of interest in getting the younger people. So what the pharmaceutical industry tries to do is less relevant. I think they'll be smart enough not to try to fight this wave that's coming.
Sure. So as you see Beantown, Greentown progress in the licensing picture, when do you say that we should see their product or your product in the stores?
I don't like to predict. I'm also not expert in that end of thing.
That's more muddy.
Yeah, but I think, you never can be sure, and there's really no point in predicting and getting false hopes or whatever. So we're working as hard as we can to get it done responsibly. It's still unclear how the state is going to function, so it's hard to put a date on it.
Sure. And do you have any personal opinions about the current people sitting on the Cannabis Control Commission?
I do not. I don't know who they are.
Okay. Wow.
I was disappointed in both Maine and Massachusetts that some politicians who were against the referenda decided to drag their feet. Again, there's a hypocrisy. Some of them were people who said, oh, we must listen to the voters. But when the voters said something they didn't like, they went off
Yeah.
to it. But I think that's being overcome now.
Are you familiar with Shalene Title?
With what?
With Shalene Title?
No.
Well, I believe Shalene will be interviewed by us later on at NECANN TV. But Shalene is kind of like you in the sense that she's fighting for the little guy in this industry. She's the one who fought for the equity program. She's the one that fought for the micro business licensing. So hopefully you guys will be able to cross paths sometime.
Yep. Well, I have to be careful because I am, after all, an advocate for one particular licensee. So you don't have you have to be careful not to be giving an appearance of undue influence.
Oh,
And
sure.
I agree with her goal, but I wouldn't. You can't have like single lobbying on who gets the license.
Yep. So let me ask you, when your product is in the stores, Beantown Greentown has probably other, other ideas for what Barney Frank will bring to it. Is there anything you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'm mostly doing advocacy, but also some advising on how to get through what's inherently a political process.
Yep.
I do think once it's all the licenses and everything are done, I'll probably just be kind of a public spokesman somewhat in advertising.
Sure. Sure. So you're going to help us fight for expungement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've always been for that.
Yeah.
I think that's the minimum that can be done.
You know, being in the business myself, I honestly feel it's hard to accept a dollar where there's people sitting behind bars for a gram of cannabis, or you were smoking cannabis in a spot they weren't supposed to.
No, I agree. In fact, when the 1994 crime bill passed, a group of us tried to get some much better retroactivity in sentencing reduction, and that's a very high priority. And I think that will happen.
Yeah. So, recently, Governor Baker had put together a commission to try to strengthen the penalties for driving under the influence of cannabis. Do you think that we have enough regulation on these cannabis rights, or is Governor Baker going the wrong way?
I don't know the specifics there, but I wouldn't fight him too hard on that. You want to basically, people shouldn't be driving if they're high.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I think the evidentiary standards are important. I think, you got to pick your fights. I wouldn't make a fight on that one.
Yep. Yep. And there's a lot that's taking place in Rhode Island this week. Rhode Island is now looking at Massachusetts as the boilerplate, so how they're going to roll out the cannabis market.
Well, that's part of what's happened. Is it is contagious in a good way. People say, "Oh, it's a terrible thing," and then a few states get into it and do it.
Yep.
And people learn, "Oh, it's not so terrible after all." Interestingly, there's an analogy between marijuana and same-sex marriage, where people say, "I don't like them doing that," and then it turns out that they don't have all the negative consequences they said.
Sure.
And people go ahead with it. And I think Colorado and Washington led the way, and that's the major driver behind increased legalization is experience.
Yep. Well, I'll say cannabis has really been at least for me, and I think a lot of other people, a way that people can come together and agree on a lot of different topics or disagree on topics without having
No
to...
question. There was a philosophical thing. The most recent marijuana serious bill in Congress, I co-sponsored with Congressman Ron Paul, who was a libertarian, very
Yep.
conservative. And we stressed our common interest in freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely. Where I was going with, there was a gentleman who was a big activist named Tim McCarthy who recently passed.
A good friend. I was
Oh, was it
terribly
good?
sad. I spoke at Tim's memorial service that they had. He was a wonderful friend of Jim and I, my husband. We were very sad when that happened.
I'll tell you, it still breaks my heart that Tim isn't with us today, because he has done so much, not only for the cannabis industry, but for Provincetown and for all rights.
Yes.
And the kids over in
Always,
Africa.
right, leading a fight for fairness in Africa. In fact, I have a text message on my phone that he sent me a month before he died, and I just keep it on the phone.
Oh man, that's great. So I assume that we are wrapping up. I want to say it was a pleasure
Thank you.
to speak with you. I look forward to seeing you again at other events, and where River Run Gardens, my company, and Beantown, Greentown are very close knit. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Great. And I thank you for that. And as I said last year when we wandered around this place, I have only one request. That everybody here should be a registered voter. If all the people in this building were registered voters and voted regularly, we'd win this fight a lot easier.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Again, NECANN 2019, it's off the hook here. You can't walk without bumping into people that you know. We had the pleasure of Mr. Barney Frank. There's going to be more interviews coming at you. Keep on watching. Peace.